Welcome everyone to our May meeting of San Diego Independent Scholars. This is the last meeting until next September, and it was arranged for us by our co-president, Alvin Halpern. I'm Barbara Heckler, one of three co-presidents for SDIS, along with Alvin and Dorothy. And Alvin is busy moving today, so I'm filling in for him. Dorothy will take over moderating the question and answer period at the end of our lecture and then close out the meeting. Just a note to our members, our email election was successfully completed. We did reach our quorum, and I will be sending out an email to all of our members with a complete list of the board as it stands now. And if you are a guest today, you can receive a regular announcement of our monthly meetings by going to sdask@gmail.com and ask to be added to our email list. You can Google our website and you'll see the SD Ask there. And that way you'll know of every single monthly meeting that we are having. Our program today being recorded and will be available on YouTube sometime in the next week. And our San Diego Independent Scholar meetings will receive an email with the link when it is available, so you can refer other people to it. I just happened to go to that, Google the name on YouTube today, and I saw that there are a bunch of other non-SDIS things that do pop up under our name, but I think you will easily be able to tell which is official SDIS stuff and which they just kind of added because they think it sounds like us. So our lecture today is titled A Review of Modern Chinese Art, including its antecedents and its relationship to modern Chinese culture. Our speaker is Dr. Kui Shen, who is a professor of Asian art history, theory, and criticism, Vice Chair and Director of the PhD program at UCSD. His teaching and writing focus on Chinese and Japanese art, with an emphasis on modern and contemporary Chinese art and Sino-Japanese art exchanges in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He received his BA in Fine Arts from Shanghai Normal University and an MA and PhD in art history from Ohio State. He's taught at Ohio State, Rice University, State University of New York, University of Oregon, and he's had a fellowship to Stanford. He's curated numerous Chinese art exhibits, has written or edited numerous books and catalogs, and if you go to Amazon, you will see some of his books there that he co-edited or wrote. So I'm very happy to be able to introduce Dr. Shen to us today, and we're looking forward to your talk. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Barbara and Dorothy. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Barbara and Dorothy, for inviting me to give this talk and also share some of my knowledge and also my research with this group of the distinguished scholars. So, so I think that we only have 15 minutes, I was told, so that I will give you kind of very brief kind of introduction of the arts and modern art of modern China. So I don't know what kind of just a second.
Barbara, mute yourself.
No, this from my side. Could you just a second? Sorry for this alarm just right now. And yeah, I think I just start this. I think usually people talking about the modern Chinese history, the modern Chinese art will start from about 1840. Why this year is so important is because in this year, the last dynasty of the China is called the Qing Dynasty. The Qing court had the battle with several Western the forces, and this battle called the Opium War is start having some dispute with the distribution of the opium in China at the time. Anyway, in this war, the Chinese Qing court was defeated. They were forced to open 11 treaty ports along the east coast of the China. I think the map on here you can see these among the 11 the east the coast cities. They became the treaty port, and among them one of the city is called Shanghai. Here I think now it's quite the largest city. I think everyone possibly know that. So the Chinese modern history usually consider the stuff from that time, because after the opening to the rest of the world, the China start their modern the change to the modern society. So during that time, in the talking about the art, we're back to the art. Is during that time, the Chinese arts are still in the situation continue the tradition and the conventions from early time. So-called Chinese art is concentrated on the painting and the calligraphy, and the main the art is concentrated on the painting of the landscapes, birds and flowers, and some figurative paintings, and follow the so-called literati tradition. This literati tradition that start from much early to about the 11th to 12th century in the Chinese so-called Qing Dynasty period. And they treated the arts as self-cultivation, self-expression, and these kind of ideas dominated in Chinese art world. The art at that time, you can see very much like this kind of the painting we're showing on the screen, although start from this late after the 1840, in the late second half of the 19th century, we see the Chinese arts already start to gain some influence from the West and the Western arts through the missionaries into China, and many kind of the church start to open some kind of art training class, mainly train the Chinese the people to paint the religious art. But at the same time, they bring this kind of Western style of painting, the Western media of the painting, like the watercolor, oil painting into China. Like even the Chinese ink painting like this one, you can see the use of the color and the brushwork in some way possibly influenced by the Western the watercolor. During after the we say this the treaty ports opened in China, Shanghai quickly became one of the most important treaty ports in China, and also quickly from the 1840s to the I became one of the largest economic center in East Asia, and became the kind of the also at the same time, the capital always attract the artist and also the art market to this place. So the Shanghai at the same time became the largest culture and the economic and culture center at the time. So you can see the art during that time. Also still concentrated on the ink painting, and you can see this painting, the self-portrait painting by the artist Ren Xiong. That's one of the major artists in the so-called Shanghai School of Painting, and formed during that time. So-called Shanghai School of Painting actually is not kind of the school of the art dedicated to a certain kind of art style. Actually, so-called Shanghai School of Painting formed the artists and art style for it's a very different kind of way, a different kind of the subject. Mainly is the school of the artists that all live and work in Shanghai. So this formed as a school of Shanghai School of Painting. So you can see for the figurative painting, like this portrait, you also see some Western influence. Although you can see the depiction of the garment and the parts that still use the ink line and the flat color, but for the body and the facial parts, you can see bring this kind of light and the shade, mainly the influence that possibly from the photography. Photography also into China in the 19th century. So we see this depiction of the facial features and also the partial the bodies actually reflect the influence from the photography. So we can see this kind of the combination between the Western influenced photography, also the traditional Chinese the ink painting appeared here. We also see the art in the Shanghai school, the painting. Also the influenced by the many different kind of sources, like the artist Ren Xiong, same artist when he painted these kind of landscapes, and possibly influenced by the Japanese painting. Again, showing on the upper right corner is a Japanese artist, the Satazi's painting in the 17th century. We can see the Shanghai artist Ren Xiong also in his landscapes possibly adopted some kind of the brushwork kind of styles from even the use of the gold as a background directly from Japanese the impact. Although we don't have many kind of direct evidence to the bridges, but the visual kind of the effect from this painting, we can see obviously under the influence of Japan. But for Shanghai school painting, it's a major difference from the early time. Is turned into the more kind of popular and folk art trends, because the reason is Shanghai during the process became the big metropolis in China. The Shanghai population actually start from about 300,000 people in the 1840s, quickly to the more than 3 million by the end of the century. So we can see the people from all different parts. Not only because it became the treaty port to many foreign companies and the banks, they established their branches, and also this kind of the treaty centers in Shanghai, and the foreign population, of course, with the establishment of so-called foreign concessions or the settlements in Shanghai, and the many kind of the foreigners living in Shanghai, but also the Chinese people from all different places also pour into Shanghai to join this and the quick development of the economy and also market in Shanghai. So we can see the peoples from all different parts of China gather into Shanghai, bring all the different kind of the influence and also the habits and also the customs into Shanghai. But the general also the interest to the art switch from the early literary taste gradually to the more kind of the popular taste. So this kind of like this painting with the auspicious meanings always become the major the topic and also the favorite topic in the Shanghai school. So we can see this kind of change of the basically the patrons in actually change the painting and change the styles at the same time. Like this painting by another major Shanghai school artist, Ren Yi, reflect this kind of trends. This depiction of the so-called 5 successful sons is based on the Confucian kind of the idea, because this is based on one real the story of this father have the 5 sons. Later they all became the scholar officials for the Chinese people for a long time. Education is the path to the success, and through the education eventually they became the scholar officials. So this kind of this father is considered very successful because he had the 5 successful sons in the past to this kind of scholar officials. So this kind of the topic became the very kind of the some kind of auspicious topics that become very popular at the time in Shanghai. And also the artist, the same artist, Ren Yi, also you can see his painting at this time also showing this kind of the Western watercolor influence for the depiction of the birds and flowers. And he was believed also studied in the one church in Shanghai at that time. This church organized the painting the training class to train the Chinese artists in different kind of the art skill, especially the Western media, the watercolors and the oil painting, and also doing the drawings. It's believed that he possibly influenced by this in his drawing and also the painting with this kind of influence from the watercolor. And also the Shanghai school artists also expanded their the themes of the painting to the more kind of many kind of the unexplored themes, like the themes related to people's everyday life, like the goldfish, and also many kind of things actually even can appear to people's table in the dinners also become the subject of the painting. And also at the same time, they also have some kind of the trends appeared during that time associated with the early kind of the epigraphic studies in the 17th century, and they continued expanded their influence in the calligraphy and the painting, and bring these kind of so-called epigraphic taste into the Chinese painting too. But they bring this kind of study of the early kind of archaeology, and use the rubbing to study the archaeology also into the painting field, and bring this kind of the taste into the calligraphy and into the painting. So these kind of the artists like we just showed you, and the Zhao Zhiqian and Wu Changshi bring this kind of epigraphic taste into their brushwork in calligraphy, seal carving, and also in the painting. And also the paintings they turn into the more kind of some abstract elements into the painting, into the Chinese painting too. And at that time, also the technology development, the kind of the printing technology also influenced the Chinese people's life. Like this kind of use the lithography into bring into the printing industry, and actually the direct across the creation of the so-called the pictorials appeared in China. This pictorial is actually directly associated when the newspaper actually established by the one British in China. This is the first Chinese language newspaper in the 1870s actually appeared. So this kind of pictorial associated with this newspaper called the Shenbao, or the Chinese Shanghai News, actually they became very, very popular. So these kind of pictorials also make them possible for these kind of the news and also the interesting kind of the imaginations, and also the Western technologies, and into this kind of the Chinese people's the daily life. So these kind of the pictorials also become the very popular at the time, associated with new kind of the technology. Besides the Shanghai, actually in the southern parts of China, in the Canton, the city near the modern city of Hong Kong, at that time is also become is another the cultural center, and the group of the artists at that time in Canton also formed another school called the Lingnan School of painting. Lingnan is another name of the Canton or the Guangzhou, the modern city. To live in that region to form another school, paid much more attention to the development of the more realistic style of the painting, also associated with the Western the concept of the this kind of perspectives and anatomies, and also use of the light and the shade to create a three-dimensional feeling into the painting. The artist Gao Jianfu here, and also his younger brother Gao Qifeng, actually they went to Japan to study, went to the Kyoto to study the more kind of realistic style of Japanese painting, Nihonga, and also the Western kind of the concept and also the technology as directly associated with this kind of perspectives, anatomies, and also the use of the light and shade into painting to create a more realistic style of painting. And also the painting still in the kind of the traditional ink, and also the use the pigment shared by the Chinese and Japanese artists at the time. But this kind of more realistic style painting also became their goal. And after they back to China, actually they advocated the new style of painting in the Chinese society, especially the promoted the painting and to serve the modern society and bring many kind of subjects, and that's never appeared in the Chinese painting before into the subject of the Chinese painting. and also to encourage people to pay much more attention to the current events and to make the Chinese painting to serve the modern society and also the modern people. And this painting on the right, you can see by Gao Jianfu actually bring kind of the light and the shade to create this more three-dimensional feeling into the Chinese ink painting. And on the left is also his painting directly depicted the current events. This is the 1930s in Shanghai when the Japanese bombed Shanghai, actually leave lots of ruins in the part of Shanghai. In this painting, he recorded the kind of East Battle. East Battle, actually, the title of this painting recorded this kind of the incidents at the time. And at the same time, start from the beginning of the 20th century, we see after the Qing Dynasty collapse, the many Chinese people, especially young students, went abroad to study especially the science and technology. They went to Japan and went to Europe and the United States, mainly concentrated study of the science technology. But also have a small group that the students actually that time they study art in these kind of places. Like the artist Li Shutong, he actually studied the painting art in Tokyo in that time, the most important art school, the Tokyo Art School. And this is on the screen is his graduation on this the piece. You can see that time in the Tokyo Art School have the tradition, every graduate to have leave their own self-portrait to the school. So in this painting, his self-portrait, you can see that he used kind of this we call it the neo kind of impressionist. Used this pointist kind of the style to depict his own self-portrait. And after he graduated from the Tokyo Art School, he back to China, established the first art program in the normal school that time. In China, they also start from beginning of the 20th century and established a new kind of educational system. Basically follow the Western model. These kind of new style of the school, especially the normal school, that time also include an art program in their curriculum. So he the one started a new program, art program in this kind of new school system. And he also bring this kind of the model drawing in the art the training on the class and in the new kind of art program, and also they became the part of the regular curriculum in the kind of the art program. And at the same time, it's about the early 1910s, the group of the new private art school actually established. This is one of the very, it lasts a very long time. The Shanghai Art Academy established in Shanghai in 1912 by a group of the amateur. Actually, this is the artists. They are mainly the commercial artists in Shanghai, but they are dedicated to study and also develop the Western style the painting in Shanghai. The artist Liu Haisu, that time he was the key member in this group for the depiction for the establishment of the art at the time. He actually that time he himself was only 17 years old, actually very young at that time. But he became one of the founder of the school, and start to introduce a certain kind of curriculum of the Western style painting, like the watercolor painting, drawings, and also the oil painting into Chinese art education system. Although they are the private school, and also we have the artist like Shi Beihong. He went to France to study in the École des Beaux-Arts de Paris as one of the most important art school that time in Paris to study the oil painting. He just went to Paris in 1919 and spent about 7 years, and eventually went to back to China in 1927 and became another very important art educator in China. To especially, and later he that's the help to establish the art program in the newly established National Central University in Nanjing, and this the start to create the new art programs in the comprehensive university. This makes a great contribution, and he trained the generations of the artists in China, and especially the first generation of the artists to concentrate on the Western style oil painting. And also, like the artist Lin Fengmian, and he the same as this Xu Beihong. He would also went to the Paris to study art in 1920s, and also spent 6 and 7 years in Europe, mainly in Paris, but also in Germany. And he also briefly studied École des Beaux-Arts too, but also involved in many kind of other art programs like the Academia Julienne, and also studied in the École des Beaux-Arts Dijon. And so there's the many programs he studied over there, also in Germany. And but different from the Xu Beihong, actually the artist we just mentioned earlier, he went to Paris to study more kind of classical art. But for the Lin Fengmian, actually he studied more in this kind of the modernist art. And after he backed from China, helped to establish the new this kind of the National Art Academy in Hangzhou, bring its kind of modernist the painting into China. And this is Xu Beihong. You can see his the kind of the interesting in the academic kind of the style of the history painting. And but the Lin Fengmian is more kind of like the other artists, like this artist Guan Zhilan. He would she's the graduate from Shanghai the art school, and went to Japan to study in the Tokyo Art School, and studied this kind of Fauvist art, and also became quite successful in Japan. Then back to China, became the professors in the many the art school in Shanghai. Like the artist Shang Yu, he was also studying in Japan and joined the joined the French artist group called the Paris School in the Montmartre in the suburb of the Paris, and became the one of the important member in the school of the Paris at that time in the 1920s and 30s in France. And but at the same time, we see have the group of the traditional Chinese the artists, ink painters. They actually that time launched the so-called National Essence Group in China, because they're facing the challenge of the Western style of painting in China, start from beginning of the 20th century. The Chinese group, the Chinese ink painters, they feel kind of strong frustration, because traditional Chinese ink painting actually that time basically marginalized from the main the Chinese art world. And it in the newly established art program didn't even include the Chinese painting there. This artist Chen Henshui, or Chen Shizhen, most of the time we know him, and just studied art in Tokyo. And after he back from Japan, he taught Chinese ink painting in Beijing, and also started to teach Chinese art painting history in there. He became the most important advocate of the revival of the Chinese ink painting, and trying to make the Chinese ink painting also fits the modern society. So we can see this this group of artists actually is although they are not like we mentioned earlier, like the Xu Beihong and the Lin Fengmian, and they study the Western style painting and introduce Western style painting into China. This group of artists actually trying to study still continue the Chinese tradition and continue the Chinese ink painting tradition in China. Especially like Chen Shizhen, he advocated this revival of the Chinese literary painting in China. So and he actually with the artists like the Qing that time also in Beijing, they become the advocates, so-called the national essence group in China, to continue and the traditional Chinese painting and continue the Chinese the traditional culture in China. And artist Qi Baishi actually closely worked with Chen Shizhen after Chen Shizhen died. Qi Baishi became this one of the representative artists that actually continued the Chinese ink painting tradition at that time, in 1930s and the later time. And the Chinese people at that time, they also made a great kind of effort to try to push the Chinese entire as a country, as a culture, into the modern world. And one very important person named Cai Yanpei, and he was the advocate of the China's new the cultural movement in the 1910s and 1920s, and especially as a representative of the so-called May 4th movement. This is the new culture and also the new enlightenment movement in China at the time, trying to help the China into the new kind of the modern the world. So he actually was the first the Minister of Education, actually after they overthrew the Qing court, established the Republic of China in 1911. He joined the new government, became the first Minister of Education, but later also served as the president of the Beijing University, and also the many important kind of position in the government. He actually started from beginning as the first Minister of the Education, trying to help the China to establish a new educational system, and also especially in the art world, he advocates of the establish the new the National Museum, new national art exhibitions, and also the new art the academies. So in the 1920s, after the 1928, after the government actually defeated this kind of warlords, established the very powerful central government in Nanjing. His kind of the advocate started from 1910s until gradually realized. So the first national exhibition actually of China established in 1929 in Shanghai, actually did have the chance to show the Chinese contemporary art in the many different kind of categories, and also to publish the catalog for the exhibition, and also the same time many kind of other the projects are launched along with this kind of the development of art, like the art museums. You can see this on the screen. This is the first the kind of the state-sponsored this kind of art museums established in Shanghai. This Shanghai Municipal Museum and municipal libraries, actually you can see established at that time. This is the municipal museum. Start with the Greater Shanghai, this municipal, the urban, the projection, this project actually that time. You can see this the museums, although later in the 1930s destroyed during the war with Japan, but you can see that the buildings are still there, whether the library and also the museum, although now they turn into different kinds of functions. But they actually they quite successfully complete this project in the 1930s, before the Sino-Japanese War. And in the 1930s, we also see this development of the modern art, actually by the group, the very enthusiastic artists. They established the new art societies. The one that's called the Storm Society, and they advocated this kind of the modernist painting. And in China, launched by this group, the actually artists, most of them, they are the faculty of the Shanghai Arts Academy, and also some students over there. They organize the annual exhibitions with the kind of this very the kind of the provocative manifestos, to advocate the modernist painting. You can see here, although we don't have in many kind of the early paintings survived from China because the constant war in China start from 1937. So we can see from the reproduction, we can get kind of a glimpse from from their this artworks created at the time in all different kind of the styles, different kind of the concepts. And this artist, Peng Xunqing, he also studied the art in Paris, back to Shanghai, taught in the Shanghai Art Academy. In this painting, you can see the influence from many different kind of the schools, the Cubist and the Surrealist and the Constructivist, all these kind of the Futurist, all these kind of the this modernist style actually, and combining in the same composition. Also have the group of artists at that time that studied in Japan, also formed another very important the art society in Guangzhou, first in Japan and later in Guangzhou. This is called the Chinese Independent Artists Association. They especially in this advocated kind of the this kind of the surrealist art at the time. But at the same time, in 1930s, another very important this media of the art called the prints, woodpulp prints, actually advocated by the writer, the Lu Xun. And he actually that's interested in the German expression wood block prints. That's represented by like the woman artist Kathy Korwitz. And she was one of the most important impressionist artists in Germany at the time. So the Lu Xun actually introduced the German expressionist, the woodcuts into China, and attracted a group of the young artists start to develop the new style of the woodcuts in China. Although we know that in China, woodcuts have the long history, but this the woodcuts is quite different. And many artists like the artist Li Hua from Guangzhou also joined this. The Tang Yingwei also joined this new woodcuts movement. They also published the journals and also have established the kind of the exchange program with the Japanese the woodcut movement at that time in Japan. And so this the Shirotokuro Society in Japan also the work with this group, the woodcut artists in China. At the same time, also we see in that time it's kind of the graphic designs also fully developed at that time in China. This kind of with the study of the epic, this the kind of the typographies, and also the different kind of the modern kind of the style bring into the graphic design, especially the very successful in the book cover design at the time. So actually that time on the Chinese the kind of book cover design, the level is almost the same as the other parts of the world, and simultaneously bring all different kinds of styles into this kind of graphic designs. And the woodcuts is also, but the style this kind of the effort and pursuing actually interrupted by the Sino-Japanese War. This war lasted quite a long, the start from 1937 to 1945, ended with the ending of the Second World War. So during the wartime, the Chinese artists and also lost the opportunity to further develop this kind of, especially oil painting, and also Western style painting, because the major art school in the East Coast that time during the war period, they basically take the very long time, the very difficult kind of the travel to eventually to the southwest part of China. At that time is still under the control of the Chinese government, and also the northwest parts were under the control of the communists. So there we can see that time the main art that continued developed is kind of woodcuts associated with the war, and many kind of like this on the screen is the woodcuts developed in the communist region because the face the turn into woodcuts in the war kind of the full cut format at the time to fit the needs of the war. The governments control Chinese governments control the region in the southwest of China, and also in Shanghai for a time as the isolated island. So during the war period, because the foreign concessions are still under the Western powers control for a while in Shanghai, start from 1937 to the 1942. After the Pearl Harbor, that happened. The Japanese actually took over the foreign concession in Shanghai, so ended the so-called this isolated island in Shanghai. But between the 1937 to 1942, actually many Chinese artists still left in Shanghai, further developed the art, like the artist He Tianjie in the left, but also have the many artists and went to the southwest part of China, in this wartime capital in Chongqing, with the government at the time, like the artist Huang Junbi, is painting depicted the bombing in Chongqing, and the Japanese the bomb is the temporary capital of the Chinese government in Chongqing. And during the wartime, this ink painting is still developed in a certain way. We see this after on the landscapes and the birds flower painting is still continue. But some artists, like the artist Zhang Zhaohe, actually use this ink media to depict the refugees of the wartime. Although this is a very large scale the painting, now you can see the damage during the wartime, but it still left to kind of as the wisdom witness, and can see here to record the wartime, these kind of Chinese people's suffering. And also the woodcut artists also use their artworks to reflect the people's sufferings, and also after the war, to criticize the government's kind of censorship. On the right, you can see here. But some woodcuts artists also used woodcuts during the wartime to reflect the kind of warfares. After 1949, actually have the dramatic change in Chinese art world, because the Communist Party took over the entire China and established a new People's Republic of China, and basically turned to the art generally, turned to the art into the kind of the tool for the ideological propaganda. And after the communists took over the China, the artists mainly they use the artworks to serve as kind of the political purpose as propaganda tools. And in the beginning of the 1950s, Chinese government and also the turn, you can see, turned the art into this kind of so-called the New Year's painting format, because the New Year's painting they use the rulers and the peasants. So during the wartime, the New Year's painting becomes a very successful kind of the propaganda tools. So after 1950s, this you can see that they also turned on the New Year's painting became the tool of the propaganda. And oil paintings and also all other art forms also served at that time. This artist Dong Xiwen depicted the inauguration of the People's Republic of China. This in 1949, October 1949, depicted the leader of the PRC, the Mao, that can make the announcement on the Tiananmen. And the artworks you can see here. The turn into this kind of propaganda to advocate on these kind of communist leaders, the revolution leaders, and their political agenda at that time. It started from 1954, after the China strengthened the relationship with the Soviet Union. actually the Soviet Union sent lots of the experts to help the PRC to for their the so-called socialist reconstruction. Along with them, some this kind of in the art world and the culture world, they also sent the Soviet Union expert to China, like this person. Became very important, played a very important role in the Chinese art world. It's called Constantine Maximo. He was the professor in the Moscow in the art academy. He was sent to China in the Central Academy of Fine Arts in Beijing to train the Chinese artists, especially in the so-called socialist realist style of the painting. This is socialist realism established in Soviet Union in 1930s, and it became the dominating kind of the style and this kind of the ideology in the art world. So the Maximo actually came to China in the Central Academy of Fine Arts, organized the so-called Maximo, very famous Maximo training class in 1957 and 1958. Trained a group of the Chinese the artists. They are mainly young graduates from the Chinese this art academy, and also young faculties working the major art academies in China. So this group of artists that studied art from the Maximo, and mainly is kind of socialist realist, Soviet socialist realist the painting. No matter in conceptually and also the technically and directly the follow his instruction, turn their painting in that way. This the artist Zhang Jianjun were the graduates of the training class. You can see that this kind of painting become the typical kind of the so-called socialist realist painting. And some Chinese artists also, they were sent to Soviet Union, like the artist Chen Sanshi. He was as a young student sent to Soviet Union to study the oil painting. After he became the professor in Hangzhou, this Zhejiang Academy of Fine Arts. And also many artists you can see that time start from 1950s, the middle 50s. These kind of so-called Soviet socialist realist style painting became the dominating. Like this artist Zhang Jianjun, the Maximo for the student, and also you can see this painting painted for the Chinese the Museum of the Chinese Revolution in Beijing in 1959. This is that time. This large kind of construction kind of the plan held in Beijing, and many kind of new architectures and new institutions they built at the time. This artist actually used the painting to decorate these kind of the places. This is one of the typical kind of the style of the socialist realist painting, depicted the revolution heroes in the Chinese Revolution history. And also of course, the most of the painting are also dedicated to the revolution leaders, especially the leader Mao Zedong, and to become the major themes in many of this kind of painting at the time. But interesting is after middle of 1950s, after Stalin died in Soviet Union, the new leader of the Soviet Union, Khrushchev, starts to launch this anti kind of the personality code, the criticize the Stalin in the Soviet Union, and these kind of criticism actually understood the echoed in China for a while. But the Chinese communist leaders have a different kind of opinion to the Stalin with the Soviet, like the Khrushchev. So the in between the Chinese Communist Party and the Soviet Union actually have that kind of strong dispute at the time. So they reflect into the art world. So in the Chinese art world, you can start to see this is trying to bring the so-called Chinese elements into the oil painting field. Even they bring this kind of Chinese painting technique into the oil painting, like this kind of the brushworks, and also the use of the flat colors and the abstract background. All these kind of usually appear in the Chinese ink painting. This kind of that's now into the oil painting. Also bring this kind of full color elements in the bright color, the flat kind of the application of the color into the painting. So we can see that on this launched the so-called national oil painting at the time. And the themes also with the criticism of the national, the personality code. And we see the more kind of this common people's image appeared in the Chinese art world too. And even in the ink painting, we can see that's a depiction of the people and the common people. Actually, especially in the southern parts of China, in Hangzhou, the Art Academy, the group of artists formed a new kind of the ink painting style. They bring this kind of the influence from the Shanghai school of painting in the late 19th century into the depiction of the figure painting. But of course, the themes of painting is changed to these kind of the new the image in the new society is part of the depiction of the parents, and also the ink painting also dedicated to this kind of the so-called the propaganda. So you can see this ink painting depicted this kind of the revolutionary heroes. Also, we can see the revolutionary leaders, and also the new kind of socialist constructions. And also especially the propaganda posters that time certainly directly served the kind of ideological purpose. You can see the propaganda posters like this, and even the woodball prints. This also served the same kind of the purpose here. Then start from 1966 to 1967. In the middle of the 20th century, and China experienced one so-called 10 years of the political chaos. This is the famous as the Cultural Revolution. During the Cultural Revolution, of course, launched by the communist leader Mao Zedong, based on this kind of his own political agenda, trying to fight with his kind of the political rivals, because he believed on that time the leadership in the Communist Party and the government, actually, according to his words, they're going to this kind of revisionist kind of the way. So he launched the Cultural Revolution, trying to destroy his political rivals in the Communist Party and also the government. So this revolution, Cultural Revolution, of course, the Mao launched, and the relied on this kind of the young students, that's the support, and also army support, because the Mao, because he made this mistake in the 1950s, that launched the so-called this Great Leap Forward movement. He was criticized, and he was forced to step down. Actually, in this kind of the regular execution of the party and the government. So that time he actually is not really to control the party and the government in the beginning of the 1960s. That's why the Cultural Revolution the way actually he trying to bring the power back. I already passed the time for the talking.
You can go on a little longer if you want to, maybe.
Okay, maybe I just go on. I keep going on. So this you can see the Cultural Revolution actually is called the political the chaos in China is really true, because they basically destroyed all the kind of the normal kind of the way of the people's life even. And this you can see on the screen this the launched the so-called the anti-four oaths, any kind of the old tradition, old culture, old custom, the old thoughts all became the target of this Cultural Revolution. They burned down the books and associated with the so-called Four Oaths and also other religions, all the religious you can see on the top. And the young the student, the formed the so-called Red Guards. They even targeted to first to the school teachers, the principals, then gradually to the all the kind of the leadership in the government. Even on the top, you can see this is the Liu Shaoqi as the chairman of the PRC. He was before the Cultural Revolution, he is a real leader of the number 2 in the Communist Party under Mao, but actually the real leaders of the party and the government. So all became the target, and you can see that Liu Shaoqi under the criticism of these kind of Red Guards, and this he on the bottom the part painting actually the early depict his early contribution to the Communist Party as the leader of the workers' government in the 1920s. But anyway, this kind of destroyed all the old world and established a new world, became the standard for the Cultural Revolution. And the art and all the artists, they are forbidden to paint any painting, or the art press actually stopped publication, and the school stopped the teaching, and the entire society throw into this so-called Cultural Revolution. And the art and related to the art, only these kind of this Red Guards, these kind of comics, and also these kind of the woodcuts, and also some model painting appeared during that period, also directly associated with Mao's image. This is the painting depicted the Mao's young Mao in the early the stage when he launched its peasant movement, became the model painting that time, and promoted by Mao's wife. And also these kind of painting you can see depict Mao during Cultural Revolution, directly adopt this image from the Soviet Union. On the top, you can see the depiction of the Stalin, painted by the Soviet Union artist in the 1930s. Actually here, the direct adopted by Chinese artists to depict the Mao's image in the 1980s. And these kind of the personality code was criticized and during the 1960s. Now that again, early 1960s, now that again, on this the personality code of Mao that reached to its peak during that time. And all the paintings you can see depict Mao in different kind of the mediums you can see shown here. But in the second half of the Cultural Revolution, some the change that we see is possibly also caused by the political the events and incidents. This one thing is in 1971, Mao's most closest actually associates, actually the person who helped the Mao and to launch the Cultural Revolution is named Lin Biao. He was the Minister of the Defense before the Cultural Revolution. Is a major support for the Mao to launch the Cultural Revolution against all the political rivals of the Mao. He was also appointed as the Mao's successor and the vice chairman of the Communist Party. But in the 1971, in the September 13, 1971, he was died in the accident and the airplane crash when he trying to, according to the official kind of the stories, that he was trying to escape to Soviet, but the plane crashed in Mongolia. But anyway, this person that suddenly became the anti-revolutionist, and also the person trying to assassinate Mao, and also the person became the largest kind of the target of the Mao. So this very dramatic and unbelievable kind of incident suddenly appeared. Actually, that really the damaged greatly actually the Mao's kind of the reputation, because people started to question whatever that happened before, and whatever the explanation they gave at the time. So we can see that in the second half of the Cultural Revolution, actually we start to see the certain kind of the change appeared. the themes of the painting or the art switched from the purely about these kind of revolution leaders to the more kind of image about the common people, especially so-called the workers, the peasants, and the soldiers. And the reason is possibly in another sense is the artist to create the first cultural revolution is kind of radical arts, and they are the radical arts. But after the Mao consolidated his power in about 1968, 69, he started to send these radical arts into countryside. So they launched the so-called send down youth movement at the time. So more than 26 million of the high school, middle school, and college graduates actually sent it to the countryside. So in the second half of the Cultural Revolution, actually the painters of these kind of the painting, they are now their own identity switched from the radical arts also became the workers, peasants, and the soldiers. So you can see this period of the art they also switch from workers, peasants, the soldiers, no matter from the themes of the painting or the authors of the painting switched. You can see these are paintings painted by artists at the time. But the Cultural Revolution ended dramatically, actually, after Mao's death in 1976, September 1976. And only 1 month after Mao's death, actually, the group, the leaders in the Communist Party and the government, they arrested Mao's wife and also the direct associates of Mao's wife. And also formally claimed the end of the Cultural Revolution, and also started to criticize many kind of extreme and radical things happened during Cultural Revolution. And in the art world, started from the 78, 79, and along with the literature movement, this is called the Scar movement. People start to directly criticize the Cultural Revolution, use their the writings and use their artwork. You can see showing here is one of the typical so-called scar art by the young artists at that time. The first class after the Cultural Revolution, we say that during Cultural Revolution, the college, all this kind of stopped the teaching. So not only to the 1977. Actually, the first the class of the college students this kind of admitted into college after Cultural Revolution. So this first class of the students in the art academy actually they formed this so-called scar art at the time. They directed question and also what happened during Cultural Revolution. These are the artists in the Sichuan Academy of Fine Arts depicted these kind of the art to this. And also this group of the artists and the college students, almost every single of them have experienced during in the countryside, because they as a middle school or high school students, they were sent to the countryside for many years, including myself. Actually, I went to the countryside for 5 years. And so there are many of their paintings also directed deal with their experience as a sand-on use in the countryside. Like an artist was only this painting depicted the older on this based on experience there. And also I have many the artists actually that time started to interest in the Western kind of this Western modernist art, use their art, although that time in the art academies, still kind of realistic style painting still dominating, but in the many kind of amateur artists, they start to more freely to explore the kind of the Western modernist art at the time. And also like the artist Huang Keping use his work to also, this is also the criticize the Cultural Revolution. This called the silence of the people during Cultural Revolution. You cannot see, you cannot not allowed to speak out. But it started from about middle of 1980s. We see the art students in all the arts academy started to to launch the so-called the new wave of the art movement. They started to just study kind of the Western style modernist painting. We can see here, all different kind of the concept actually. At that time, with China open to the world in the start from beginning of the 1980s, many kind of Western philosophers, Western kind of the concept of the art and culture into China, pour into China. So we can see the artists that started doing many kind of like the kind of surrealist kind of painting, like the artist turned this early kind of neoclassical kind of the David's painting into the more kind of the surrealist and also cubist art. And some artists also use a new art kind of the style and the format, like installation art. And also this artist directly use his artworks to criticize the Cultural Revolution. This is his installation, and some artists also use the more kind of the different kind of the format of the art actually appeared in the Chinese art world. And the artist Xu Bing, and this is also used his work, actually installation work, to questioning actually that time this kind of the frustration for this generation, how to absorb a kind of all the concepts and the ideas and the thoughts from outside, also how to deal with their own culture. So and this because for this generation, even their own culture is a kind of the taboo for a long time. They couldn't touch. So that time, actually, this generation artists facing the kind of the dilemma. They have to deal with the both sides. How to kind of to deal with the news out from the West, and also their own tradition from their past. So this kind of artworks, actually many reflect this kind of the idea. Artists should be, this is a very, I don't think I have time to in detail of his work, but he is one of the most thoughtful artists to use his kind of use his work to question on these kind of things. And the artist, the artist Huang Yongping is also that time the student in the Zhejiang Academy of Fine Arts, and to also reflect this kind of frustration. This is a very interesting work. He put the two books. One is the history of the Chinese painting from his teacher, Wang Boming, and the concise history of the modern painting from the British artist Herbert Reed. So that he at that time typically represented this generation. They have to learn the modernist, the Western modernist art, but also the traditional Chinese painting at the same time, and how to absorb them, and then this is quite kind of this is challenging for this. So he just put this two books in the wash machine to wash for 2 minutes, and put it together. You can see here. This is actually typically reflect this kind of frustration of this group of artists. And to the 1990s, actually, the artists actually going to the more kind of the different directions. And also, if we say the 1980s, the artists are still trying to learn and this kind of Western modernist art, because from a long time the closed door, not until the 1980s they didn't have a chance to learn art and culture from the country, from even the Greater Roman, the Renaissance, to the 19th century, these kind of the modernist and the postmodernist. At the same time, they used a few years to try to absorb and learn things in such a short the time period. But to the 1990s, actually, the Chinese artists turned to the more their works to deal with their own kind of the issues in their own the direct surroundings and their own society. This artist, they use this kind of so-called political pop. This is the kind of the art actually appeared in the Soviet Union in the end of the Soviet Union period, and the artist actually here also use the same kind of the concept, and they actually use the Cultural Revolution kind of image, but to deal with the more kind of the current kind of issue after China opened to the rest of the world, this kind of consumerism. And this is the in the society, you can see here used kind of the this brand name of the Western culture. This is to bring the Chinese Cultural Revolution kind of image together to make his comments on these kind of issues. And we also see actually the quite active the group, the woman artists actually at the time also joined here. This artist Lin Tianmiao actually used installations and the video art to deal with many kind of feminist issue at that time. And the family also became this very important kind of issues in the 1990s in China. So her work actually, this also reflected these, like the artist Shi Hui, also the very active woman artist at the time, can see the also can see the work, her installation works and also the other works deal with these kind of issues. Even in the ink painting, we started to see that start from 1990s. Actually, this kind of abstract, the kind of the style, the ink painting also appeared in the ink painting world. So the ink painting as a media actually they start to deal with the many kind of more kind of modern, the contemporary issues in there. So the artists like Wang Dongling, they also the director adopted this kind of the post-war Japanese the kind of modernist concept in calligraphy. And also he bring this kind of the abstract kind of the concept into his calligraphy and the calligraphic artworks that in this painting here. Like the artist Zhang is also combine this kind of the Chinese early kind of religious, like especially this kind of Chinese Chan Buddhism, Buddhist kind of concept, and also the Chinese Taoist philosophies into the ink painting to create the more kind of the abstract ink painting at the time. Okay, I think I talked already too long, and I just stopped here because this have no way to seems to cover such a long time.
Thank you, Dr. Shen. This has been absolutely fascinating to see how the art has changed in response to the culture at different times and so on. I deliberately let you go on a little bit longer because it was so wonderful. And I thought we could have a shorter question period, but nonetheless, we will have a question period now. And it'll go as long as you, if when it gets to be too much for you, just tell us. But I think we shouldn't have more than 15 or 20 minutes of questions right now.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I would ask anyone who wants to ask a question, if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a function that says raise hand. If you raise your hand, then I'll take your questions in the order that the questions appear. And then you will have to unmute yourself when you talk. So the first hand up is Faye Gersh.
Oh, I just wanted to congratulate you. It was absolutely marvelous art show and history show. I have never, what do I know, but I've never seen so much Chinese art in perspective. And of course, the earlier things that you showed were so beautiful that I couldn't help but regret that they were changing into more Western style. And I hope they haven't disappeared totally from the art scene in China. I don't know where to start, except I just think we have so much to learn from traditional Chinese art, although I thought that the later art was just wonderful too. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, if I have some opportunity, I can very happy to talk to you about the ink painting, especially ink art, continue developing in China. Actually, the past 2 decades, my major effort is trying to encourage the Chinese ink painting, ink art, although they're facing the great challenge from all different kinds of media of art, the new concept, but trying to encourage them to continue their practice and also their the even for the system how to help this tradition of Chinese art to continue. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, I was absolutely fascinated with the modern ink art at the end, but now Barbara Heckler has her hand up, so I'll talk later.
Yeah, I wondered how much influence the government has on artists and if that has changed since the revolution.
Government is, you mean the revolution is from what time?
Yeah.
You mean there's a current
I'm
government
wondering about censorship or the whole period where we were showing all that art that related to the revolution. Was that just kind of a natural thing that the artists wanted to do, or did the government encourage that?
In which period you're more specific talking about?
I think maybe you could talk about 2 or 3 periods, the initial revolution, but certainly then the Cultural Revolution also. So, and then and then afterwards, the very last period of time.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I think should say the censorship exists all the time, even for the different government. Even before in the first half of the century, we see also have the certain kind of censorship from the government. But of course, after 1949 is certainly the art that under the very strict kind of the ideological control. We should say that. So I don't think this changed too much. Although we do have the short period relatively loose. The periodically in the early 1960s, and also the 1980s and the 1990s sometimes. But we should say this kind of the control is still continued. That's no doubt. But now, I think the artists also, the Chinese artists also smart enough. They find many ways to deal with this kind of censorship. They trying to also find some way to express their ideas and also use their work to show their thoughts. Especially now, actually, I think the censorship is much more difficult because you have these kind of the different kind of the channels and also the way of the communication, and also everything going to the digital, everything going to so I think the censorship will still continue, but on the other hand, the artists also, with the new kind of technology, new kind of the social environment, they enjoy the more kind of the different way to express their idea.
Miriam Kastner's hand is up.
2 parts of the question. One is just today, what is the control today by the government? The other question is, you showed us a beautiful set of paintings from early time to today. All the painters were men. I haven't seen any woman painter. So what is the situation of the status of women in the art culture?
Actually, I show you it's quite a few. There are women artists.
I don't know the names. I couldn't recognize. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's the name is difficult because the Chinese name is very difficult to tell the gender. Yeah, yeah. They do have some. But on the other hand, I should say it is really true. The most of the kind of the seems established artists, they were men, especially in early time. But this changed quite a lot. Before that, the women actually in China, because possibly under the influence of the Confucian kind of moral standards, women supposed to be at home to help
Yeah.
For the many studied in art academy, actually some artists in the early career already kind of established, but later they basically give up. So they're back to the home. That's quite unfortunate on this. But now I think now the younger generations are quite different. Now we should say in the arts academy, we find actually students, more than half they are women.
Yeah.
And also the many kind of the women artists that very actively participating in the exhibitions and even international exhibitions and for the publications, they're quite different from before. So, so I think this since it's changed with with the kind of the awareness of the female artists themselves as a woman, they know how to fight for their own rights. I think this, I hope this in the future we see more kind of the positive side appear in Chinese art world.
The next hand up is Fran Zimmerman.
Hi, yes. I came a little late and I just wanted to ask you if you talked about Ai Weiwei. I don't know how to say the name correctly. Do you want to say it for me?
Oh yeah, it's Ai Weiwei. It's
Ai Weiwei.
It's a writer.
Did you talk about him?
I
earlier?
didn't in this talk. I didn't talk about him. It's because I think about him. You quite easily you can find out here in the online lots of things about him. I could very easily also. I did talk to him in the several other occasions. Possibly also can find it YouTube. But yeah.
How does he fit into the picture that you have painted of these folks?
I didn't reach too much this in the most contemporary parts because he actually played a very important role in the contemporary parts because my talk is mainly concentrated on the modern parts in the early from the last century to about 1980s and the early 1990s this time. He actually left China in the 1980s to US and later back to China and started doing many kind of work directly that deal with many kind of public concern and all kind of things in the contemporary art world. Yeah.
So he is a later figure.
Yeah, it's a relatively. Although he in the late 1970s and 1980s, he also involved one of the very important the art society called
Thank you.
group in Beijing, and at that time he was relatively young, but he was a member in that group. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Shen. I think you've been going for an hour and a half now, and we really appreciate it. If there aren't any more questions, I think we'd like to give you a big thank you because I found this just very educational and just very, very interesting.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.